Hello, everyone. Welcome to the 109th episode of the Spiritual Brainstorm. In this episode, I'd like to talk about energies and evolution. Now, what is that? I tried to find some kind of title for this because it's not really easy, but it's basically the idea is why do certain events happen? Like, for instance, the coronavirus or an earthquake, or, like many channelers talk about energies, new energies coming, new energies this, the moon that, eclipse here, or, certain dates. And I just wanted to try to give it a shot to try and put this whole thing into perspective and understand how it actually works. So first, I'll have to do a quick recap of the way that I see reality in the universe and how it's structured. And this is and I'm not going to be very thorough or precise because it's really just a recap. So it's micro to macro with life here in between the cell, and you have nothingness, infinity, then you have waves and multiverse. Then you have the photon, light, universe. Then you have subparticles. And you have galaxies. I'm actually skipping a few here steps because I just want to go quickly. Then you have atoms, solar systems, and all of these are, of course, linked. Then you have molecules, and you have planets. So, oops, what's going on here? Okay. Let me just take out the Wi-Fi just in case. So we're not. So what happens is you see all of these structures, for instance, this. All of these structures ultimately are just, they pop out of nowhere instantly. All of these structures are created instantly in a place where time flows infinitely fast, and each of these steps is just a strategy or a form to escape perfect symmetry. Because for everything, for every wave, for instance, that exists, let's do the wave a little more pretty. For every wave that exists, you necessarily have a wave that is of exact opposite phase. And if you superpose them, if you put them one on top of each other, they will cancel each other out at every point. And that's why infinity and nothingness switch around infinitely fast. And in order to find something in between, they always have to find new solutions for avoiding perfect symmetry. And the reason why you don't have perfect symmetry in our world is because you have life. Life is the ultimate form which sits between nothingness and infinity, which serves as a kind of how should I say, scrambling algorithm. Scrambling algorithm or interference, even interference. And it's kind of like life sits between two parallel universes which are perfectly symmetrical, and then mixes them up and creates this totally new universe which is asymmetrical because of the way that it's configured, and quantum uncertainty that is within life manages to pull out from two perfectly symmetrical universes a universe where experience is possible with space, time, and all kinds of things, which is limited, where not everything exists at once. And that's its whole purpose, is to create experience out of what before is existence. But before life exists, first you have a structuring up from nothingness towards infinity and a structuring down from infinity towards life. And all of these different steps are just part of the forms and strategies that sit between life and nothingness, or between life and infinity, to help it in its kind of scrambling or interference role. So when you have, for instance, only waves, only in order to move from universe where you just have energy in the form of vibrations, you have to find some kind of form which allows for the escape of perfect symmetry at that level. And that is the creation of the photon, or some other term, because the photon is not an accurate term, but it's the best that we have as a vocabulary. You wrap these vibrations around each other around a black hole in a toroidal fashion. We have these toruses that like spin like this and then just spin around. And if you have that kind of structure, then you can avoid perfect symmetry, but only for a time. After a certain time, then you have photons and antiphotons, or whatever you want to call them, that will also, again, create the threat of perfect symmetry and superposition and back to nothingness and infinity. And so all of these structures basically create themselves instantly, and they don't have a particular form. The only form that they have is symbolic. It's just like a strategy for avoiding symmetry, but they don't necessarily have a physical form. They don't necessarily appear in a certain way. So it's like even vibrations are already a form. But remember, it's almost like these the octaves on a piano. Like you would have like vibrations here, photons here, and then atoms here, or whatever. And then in between, you have plenty of different notes. And it's just that certain things appear instantly. And that is, when you play one note on the piano, all of the others resonate as a sympathetic resonance instantly. And so, regardless of which note you play, like for instance, whichever C note you play, whether it's C3 or C4 or C5, all of the other Cs will resonate instantly with that note that you played. If you have the pedal, of course, put down, and the chords can vibrate freely. But what am I getting to here is that, so all of these things are created instantly, okay? So multiverse, and they don't have necessarily a form. They only acquire a form through life and its experience and the interface that it creates inside its experience. So the way that we see a solar system is not necessarily the way the solar system appears ultimately. Its ultimate reality. It is an interface that we've placed on top of just a structure which manifests itself instantly and is there only to escape perfect symmetry and to reach life to create experience. And then life basically reverse engineers all of this through humans. That's one of the ways that it does that. But basically, life, from the living cell to animal, through animals and all of that stuff, it basically reverse engineers everything down towards the molecular level, grossly speaking. And then as the planet reaches a planetary consciousness through humans, then humans can reverse engineer going a little bit further down. And it's always reverse engineering. That is, it's not like this is 100% reverse engineers with animals and 0% reverse engineered. It's like always like sort of a shade, like humans manage to, first of all, reverse engineer biology. Like we're basically biology becoming aware of itself, hence our power over biology via the placebo effect. That is, we can affect our own biology in a way that is impossible for animals. Like animals don't really have a placebo effect. But humans do, because we have beliefs and the power of the mind, and that becomes more and more prevalent and important as we develop our consciousness and we become more and more self-aware and reverse engineer biology. But then what's important, though, is these structures, these ideas for perfect symmetry are pure, which means there is a template. There is a template that exists forever of what a planet planetary consciousness is. Um, Simply because all of these structures appear instantly out of the void. And then life and experience fills in the blanks of what happens here and creates time so that you can experience all of this in a sequence, in a sequential, logical fashion, rather than everything appearing at once, just like these notes that appear at once. So it's almost like playing the keyboard, going from C1 or something, and going one by one, note by note, one on top of the other, and playing them sequentially, rather than just playing one note and all of the other notes that are linked to it appear instantly because of the resonance. And that's what we've done with life experience and creating linear time. Of course, it's a bit more complicated because all of these notes come into focus at the same time, because as life creates experience, it's everything sort of comes into focus like the focus effect of a camera. So everything is kind of blurred, and then as life has an experience in a world that it creates, then time sort of stretches like an accordion, and all of this takes on more and more precise and specific form, and a defined form, and you sort of reverse engineer all of this. But how do what I wanted to say is, how do certain events arrive towards Earth and our evolution? So, like I said, some of these ideas, like the living cell, for instance, or let's say the molecule, all of these ideas exist. They pre-exist. They're just like, but they're more like templates. They're not. There's no experience there. It's like a perfect template for escaping perfect symmetry of the level below. Like the living cell is, you could say that there's like only one perfect cell that is a template for all of the imperfect cells, and that represents the perfect solution for perfect symmetry to escape the molecular perfect symmetry level. And that perfect idea is a filter, a kind of a filter. So let me put it this way. Imagine that you have infinity that wants to experience itself. It's a bit more complicated than that, but let's again try to simplify, because otherwise your head will be smoking and mine as well. So it wants to help the molecule, for instance, guide the molecule. Let's say there's a little molecule here, the little molecules in the sea, and it wants them to evolve and to form the living cell. So what happens is infinity sends out information that is pure, which is unconditional love. And that pure vibration then passes through the multiverse filter, the universe filter. And I'm using these terms, but these are actually the conscious versions of those things. And so the multiverse, you could say that it's something beyond Buddha. I don't know what beyond Buddha is. I don't know. Something like God. Okay, let's say God. The universal level is like Buddha. Then there's like, let's say there's the solar system level, and that would be like Jesus. Let's just say. Then it goes through the Gaia consciousness, let's say Mother Mary. And then it passes through the filter of this perfect idea of the living cell. And so this unconditional love is what Source emits permanently. And then as it goes through the filter of God, Buddha, Jesus, Mother Mary, or all of these different steps, it becomes more and more tailored to guide whatever the state of consciousness of these elements is, for them to manifest the living cell or get closer to that idea. And so this energy is then filtered through all of these layers, passes through the idea of the living cell, and then goes down and reaches these molecules. And that could be, for instance, it could manifest in the physical as a volcano that would create a how do you call that? Like a hot spring or something, inside, like in the bottom of the ocean, that is at the perfect optimal temperature, like 70 degrees Celsius or something, for there to be more chemical activity, which spurs the development of more and more molecules, amino acids, proteins, and stuff. And eventually, they arrange into a living cell. And so that's one example. Now, the other example is, so you have our planet, and you have little humans on there. And what we are meant to do is achieve a planetary consciousness here, reach the point where we form a planetary consciousness, and we're at a certain point in the evolution on our way there. And so again, infinity sends unconditional love. It is filtered through plenty of different entities, multiverse, universe, galaxy, solar system, planet. And then it takes physical form through the consciousness of the beings that create the reality around them. Which means that since humans are at a certain form a collective consciousness together already, of course, just not a balanced one, we're still in the illusion of separation. And our belief system is what is going to give a form to a message which has no form, and which is molded and filtered through all of these layers until it reaches us, for us to have an experience which is tailored to our belief system in order to foster evolution towards this achieving a planetary consciousness, but unique to us, specific to us. It's like if you had like a template of the perfect flower, like the idea of the flower, which is universal, perfect, balanced in every way. And then that, of course, emits a certain energy and frequency. And then because in experience, the different plants, they're not perfect, they take on a certain trajectory in terms of their development, they're going to manifest physically that flower, and is going to take one specific form, which is an imperfect version of the perfect template. And the same for us. Like all of the planets that reached and achieved a planetary consciousness, which is all of the civilizations out there that you hear about, like Pleiadians, Arcturians, whatever, all of them are guided by the same template, which has existed since the beginning of time, because it is just a sort of a reflection, a strategy to escape perfect symmetry, and it appears instantly. It's like a solution to an algorithm, if you will. But then it takes on a specific and unique form through the limited beings that are in a limited experience. And that's what creates the experience, because from those templates, you cannot create experience, because even though they're a perfect solution to symmetry, a perfect symmetry, the problem of symmetry appears instantly at the level above, because they are not imperfect, precisely because they're too perfect. So when you have a perfect solution to a problem, it finds a sort of, there's almost like a perfect problem that appears instantly from that perfect solution. So only imperfect solutions can create the experience of going from one problem to a solution with time in between. So it's almost as if from a living cell a human appeared instantly, because simply it's just like it's probabilities. Like if time flows infinitely fast and you can assemble these cells to one another like Lego blocks, well, the perfect form of a humanoid conscious being will appear instantly out of the void. But that being will be so perfect that the next level will also appear, and there's no time in between. There's no time here for experiencing anything. And it's thanks to the imperfection, the imperfect solution to a problem, that you can create time between those different levels. Um, so here you have like animals and all kind, like evolution and all kinds of things. And that's what's beautiful, actually, because what's the point for Source to manifest all of these things instantly? There's no time for experiencing the different things that Source is. And so this coronavirus is a tailored experience that it's actually all of the experiences are unconditional love. It's just that they are filtered at every layer and tailored for taking on a specific form that will take humanity in a specific direction based on their level of consciousness. So you could say, like, for instance, in the medieval ages, you had the Black Plague, and almost half of the population died. And that was an experience that was simply unconditional love, filtered through all of the layers of of what's above, of course, which is why it becomes more and more distorted. And the biggest distortion very often occurs at the level of human beings in the physical, because at that time, everybody was talking about apocalypse in the sacred scriptures, that the end of the world was near. And so, even a message which is unconditional love then can take the form of death and suffering because of the highly um, um, highly distorting filter that the people in experience from their limited perspective put on that pure or almost pure energy that is loving, but that is tailored, of course, to the experience of the beings on the planet. Like, for instance, if you could tap into source directly and without all these filters, very often the message would not make sense. You'd like be burned instantly. Um, you'd be Yeah, which is why very often you have to, when you experience source, you experience source out of the body, because there's just certain how should I say, it's almost like you're limiting beliefs and all of the traumas, all of the things that you accumulated along your life in the physical, which are misaligned with unconditional love, um, are like resistance in a wire, like an electric wire, you know, like you have a wire, and if you plug it into the wall, and the socket of that wall delivers infinite energy, which is source, basically infinite energy, and that wire is highly resistant, it will burn instantly. It will instantly blow up in flames. And what you have to do is to make sure that there is no resistance to that wire, and then the energy can circulate freely without any impediments. And our traumas, our limiting beliefs, all of those are resistance, are the equivalent of resistance of the wire. And so, if the message of source or this unconditional love energy wasn't filtered through multiverse, universe, galaxy, and all of these, understand that all of these are, again, conscious beings. Like galaxy, that would be, for instance, something like the Pleiadians. Then we would burn instantly. So it's all tailored. And by the way, when channelers try to analyze what this energy is, these energy waves that we receive from the moon, from the stars, from the planets, from everything, from the alignment of this or that, they can tap into plenty of different levels to try to understand what those messages are. They can go to the planetary level, the solar system level, the galactic level, the universal level, the multiverse level. And of course, if they reach out to source level, then they'll just say, it's unconditional love. And that's all it is. And there's nothing more to say about it. But as you go down and down towards these layers, the message becomes more and more specific, more and more concrete, let's say. Um, and there isn't one level that is better than the other. It just all depends on what you want to focus your attention on and what is relevant to you personally as a person, what would help you in your particular now moment. And there isn't one level that is better than the other. Like one day you could listen to a channeler that channels the Pleiadians, and that would be perfectly useful and relevant at that point. And then at another point, it's better to go and listen to a scientist that is forecasting something, and or a philosopher or whatever. It doesn't really matter. And so it's all about reaching a planetary consciousness, and that means that we have to recognize the illusion of separation, accept that we are on one planet together, and that there are certain consequences to that. And the coronavirus is ultimately the perfect experience for that. It is an experience that makes us understand that we're all interlinked, whether we like it or not. And now we have a choice. We have a choice of either trying to break those links consciously and go down a level in terms of our consciousness and become more animal-like. That is, lose the planetary consciousness and just focus on me, separate from the others, secluded in my home, confined with a mask, with trying to protect and shield myself from others, from the influence of others, from the threat of other people, because that's what the coronavirus ultimately is it's presented as anybody is a threat to anybody else at a level that is unprecedented, even though in the medieval ages, for instance, you had much more chances of going outside and being murdered in the woods randomly by a random stranger than you have a chance now of dying from the coronavirus, even if you kissed half of the planet, which is quite crazy. But that's just the way that the reason why it's so intense, this fear, is because we have to become conscious of this trial, of this choice that we're being put in front of us, and we have to make that choice consciously. And if the choice is not clear enough, we cannot half-ass this. We cannot improvise. We cannot say, well, I'm choosing, but I'm choosing, kind of by default, not really knowing what I'm choosing. We have to deliberately choose whether we want to go walk this line of, let's cut the ties, let's live the separation, close the borders, close our homes, stop seeing each other, and or provide all of these conditions for willing to interact with anybody else. And that is also something that we have to let go, because ultimately none of your cells impose conditions on other cells in your body for being part of the same organism. Like your stomach doesn't say, okay, I'm willing to interact with the liver, but only if the liver is wearing a mask and is vaccinated. I mean, that's just, it's, yeah, I mean, you get the idea. Of course, it's not as extreme as that, but it's about, fundamentally, it's about choice, or about recognizing that we are in this together. We are one single planet, and act like a global organism would act. That is, when you are sick, for instance, your body takes a rest and your cells are working overtime to heal the body. Not police the body, but heal the body. What does that mean? It means exactly what many doctors are saying. Instead of trying to control something that we have no control over, we only have the illusion of control, then we just deal with the symptoms as best we can and the most um, with the most solidarity and love that we can. That is, when there is a, like, for instance, boost the hospital staff, um, make certain nurses graduate a little bit early and train them specifically for handling coronavirus. Um, um, like, just try to do anything and everything, like open new hospital beds and artificial respirators. Try and find which treatments alleviate the symptoms of coronavirus the best. Is it an aspirin? Is it the whatever hydrochloroquine, whatever? And I'm not saying I don't have the answer for that, but it's just the approach. That's the approach that we should be having, rather than doing what we're doing right now is the equivalent of your organ, like for instance, your body, you catch a flu, your whole body catches a flu, and then every organ sort of stops the blood flow, and tries to retain the blood flow within it and refuses to have circulation of all the cells in the body because it doesn't want to be affected by the flu. And ultimately, if you, the lesson is when you have this unconditional love and these experiences that come from us from up top, they will be universally experienced regardless of what we do. When your body, for instance, if you stub your toe, the pain, you experience it like it's almost coming from your entire body. The pain, it's not like the pain is really like it traverses you completely. So there are sometimes experiences that are individual, but where the collective, or limited, for instance, in space and time, but where the collective acts as a support. Like if you stub your toe, of course, your whole body is involved in healing the stubbed toe, by sending it extra resources, extra this, and not by sacrificing themselves. Like the organs are not going to go on a strike, or the stomach will stop digesting to and stop whatever it's doing to help your stub toe. They will actually do better and more with more intensity what they're already doing. So your body has to work even better than it's already working in order to heal something like a wound or a problem that is localized. And then there are also experiences that are global, that affect your entire body, regardless of, like if you have a virus, like if you have, I don't know, AIDS, or the flu or something, your entire body is affected. Your entire your muscles are all tired, and you have plenty of different symptoms. But you don't necessarily have an organ in your body that's saying, "Oh, I'm cool. I'm pulling myself out of this whole game." And the coronavirus is just that. It's one experience which is meant for us to choose and say, okay, we have the really to make a conscious choice whether we want to behave like a global collective organism, or whether we want this keep this illusion of separation and control, which is of course just illusory. It's an illusion. Um, but and that would take us sort of backwards. And of course, I don't think that that's where we're heading. I think, on the contrary, we're going towards more like this recognition that we're part of a global collective organism, and going in that. But sometimes you have to learn by the negatives. That means you have to experience what it is. This last little bits of separation, of fear of the other, of paranoia, of tragedy, and all that stuff. To say, okay, that's not actually what I want. And I prefer to live with the threat that I may die, because that's just what life is. I may die, and take whatever precautions I can at my level, which is what resonates with me. That is, if for instance, I feel reassured by washing my hands, and that gives me comfort, then that's what I'm going to do. But I'm not going to try and impose the solutions that work for me individually to the entire humanity, just because I don't want to feel alone in in the way I deal with my fear of death, for instance. And that's the same for our body. Like, not every cell reacts the same way to a disease. Like, the immune cells have a different role than the blood cells, than your organs, than your muscles, than everything. Um, and that's perfectly fine. But the immune cells are not telling every other cell in your body to behave like them, and do what they do, um, in reaction to an event that is global, like you catching the flu. Um, and so, yeah, I mean, that's ultimately the message we receive is always the same in a sense. So it's always this template, reaching this template of a planet, reaching a planetary consciousness. And that has been going on from the beginning of time. That is, every single experience that humanity has traversed throughout its history, whether it's World War II, whether it's the Inquisition, the medieval ages, the colonizations, and everything, all of those events are have always been about reaching a planetary consciousness, and the way they take place as in the physical are just a reflection of the poor level of consciousness of humanity at a certain point in time. For instance, if you think about it, like colonization, when the European explorers um, sort of went on a crusade and conquered all of these different countries, quote unquote. I mean, they would say discovered. Of course, they didn't discover anything, but they're the ones that reached out to the all of the other organs, let's say, or continents. They stitched this planet together, and today there is not a single, well, very little human beings on this planet that live with the ignorance of being on a planet and knowing that there are other people speaking other languages, other cultures, and all that stuff. We are very much, like most humans, are very well aware that they are on a planet and there are many different continents, countries, and all that stuff. And this process of stitching the earth together could have been done in much less violent ways, much less peaceful ways. And so it's almost as if this message that is filtered through the planet says that, like, they have a neutral kind of message. Now it's time for you to stitch the planet together so that every human is aware that they're of every other human on the planet. And then it takes physical form as colonization and the brutal violence and imposing the idea of monotheist religions and all that stuff on other cultures, simply because it is the reflection of the level of consciousness of the humans on Earth at that point in time. And so it's not the fault of Source or God. It's just that regardless of the level of consciousness, the goal is achieved. That is, today we are all aware one of each other, but the experience is not necessarily pleasant because of the resistance in the wire, the belief systems, the level of consciousness. And so when you have this pure message that is filtered through all of these layers and arrives here and takes the form of the coronavirus, the way that we experience it can be in a positive or a negative way, and not all humans are going to experience in the same way, which is why, for instance, I didn't see a point in being vaccinated, because I don't feel that I have this resistance in my wire, in my body, that is going to give me this bad experience or this terrible illness. And I'm not necessarily also trumpeting that I'm invulnerable. And I accept that maybe if I catch the disease, then it's something that I need to experience, or maybe in 2 months I'll change my mind and saying, well, now actually I feel like I need to be vaccinated. I don't have any kind of static belief about what I should be doing in the future. I just know that right now I don't feel the need for it, and therefore I'm not going to go for it. Um, and I give myself the right also to experience this one event, which is universal, through my own individuality, because I have a set of beliefs and a set of traumas in my body which I own. I owe them. I own them. Let's say I own them. I own up to them, and therefore, it's almost like I'm saying that I want to experience this universal event in a individual way and unique way. And this, of course, is always going to be the case because not everyone, for instance, is going to experience the paranoia and fear that the governments are propagating in exactly the same way. Some people will be much more scared and some people less scared. But when you're obsessed and watching the collective all the time, like watching mainstream media, watching what scientists say, it's almost as if they were telling you how you should manifest in physical form a non non an event that comes from all of these filters that is about making us advance towards collective consciousness, experiencing it in a way which is conform to what the collective thinks. So if you have a bunch of scientists that all go up, all are interviewed by the mainstream media and saying, the coronavirus, if you catch it, this is the symptoms you have. This is how much time this is how you'll suffer. This is the dangers that you face and all that stuff. And you really buy into that in terms of your beliefs, then you're aligning with that experience. You're bringing that collective experience into your individual one, on top of your individual one, because still you are an individual and you will not necessarily subjectively experience all of these things in the same way, but you'll manifest those symptoms because you said, basically, it's almost as if you just kind of agreed. You said, I want to join in this collective experience, and that's not necessarily a bad thing, not at all. Because maybe that is exactly what you need, and maybe that's very reassuring. Because it's actually, for some people, to experience these mass events, these mass energies that reach us in an individual manner, you can sometimes lose your mind. And this is something that I've experienced. I think I had a very, very deep depression where I was almost about to commit suicide, like back in April of last year. And that's what happens when sometimes you decide to live them in your individual way. You don't have the reassuring companionship of the collective to say, we're in this together and we're experiencing the same thing, you know? It's really not necessarily better to experience it in an individual way. The reason I did it is because ultimately that is at the stage I am in terms of my beliefs. And it doesn't mean I'm suffering less. It means I'm suffering differently. It means I'm living all of this differently. And for a human, it's evolved from apes, of course. It's not necessarily easy to feel yourself disconnected from the collective. Now think of, like, for instance, a chimp in a tribe of 20 chimps that acquires some kind of new weird competence and experiences reality in a totally different way than all of his fellow chimps. Life is going to be difficult because he may be excluded from plenty of rituals and comforting kind of moments experienced as a collective, like, for instance, when they are grooming each other or socializing or plenty of other things. So, but ultimately, I think this is what the future of humanity is that it's neither living everything fully as an individual, nor is it living it under the spell of a arbitrarily decided collective filter, which is what the governments and mainstream science people are selling us. It is choosing the collective that is aligned with who you are as an individual for experiencing these collective events. And that is the reflection of what happens in your body. That is, when you catch the flu, since every single one of your cells is individual, it didn't lose its individuality, but it knows what organ it is a part of, that is, which cells resonate with its individuality, then you can experience the same event with the cells that are similar to you or that have the same kind of perspective on reality without having to try to impose that experience on all other cells of the body. So when you catch the flu, when you catch, I don't know, when you catch diarrhea, for instance, your intestines are not saying to your entire body, this is what I'm experiencing. You have to experience this disease the same way that we are and deal with it the same way we are. Totally, absolutely wrong. But they also know that that is who they are and what collective they join. So that's also something that we have right now in the spirituality, for instance, like when you join the anti-vax groups or the some spiritual communities that believe in the Grand Reset and all kinds of other plenty of other different things. What you're actually doing is almost like joining an organ in the body that is going to experience an event like that is neutral in nature, like the coronavirus, in your own individual way, but within a collective. And it's not right now the main way that people are doing it is they're joining those communities because they think they hold the truth, and compared to the other humans or collective of humans that are lying. And that's a very dualistic or not necessarily very aligned way of seeing this. It's more about finding the community which resonates with who you are as an individual right now, so that you can experience this event in this unique way, but don't feel lonely in your experience. And that's also something that I'm trying to do. I'm trying to find people that are open to the way that I'm seeing the world in my reality, because being alone is very difficult for a human. We are social creatures. So, but we shouldn't necessarily do that in order to band together and try to conquer other people and make them believe what we believe, or reunite and have this collective experience in a way that where we're thinking we're superior to those that are experiencing the coronavirus with vaccines, masks, and all that stuff. Because that's not at all. That's not at all how it is. It's really just about experiencing things from your individuality and choosing consciously which collective experience is most suited for who you are, without denigrating or demeaning any other experience. It's just that right now, people are mostly choosing unconsciously to be part of the mainstream media and government's story or way of interpreting or experiencing this event, like the coronavirus, this energy wave that is traversing us, and that is only about this, about achieving planetary consciousness, no more nor less. They're choosing that unconsciously rather than consciously because they believe that they hold the truth. And making that choice on the basis of what is true and what is false is just an antiquated way of doing things. And that is what we'll have to let go ultimately. So sorry, I've been rambling like crazy, but I hope now you have a much more clear picture as to energies and evolution, how all of these events come, whether it's an earthquake or a coronavirus or an asteroid or an alien invasion. All of these events are just a physical manifestation of a neutral event that goes through all of these filtering layers, and that is always about achieving the next level in consciousness. Afterwards, for instance, once we achieve the planetary consciousness, then it's about achieving a solar system level consciousness, a solar system becoming conscious of itself, and that is going to be through things like Star Trek and interacting with other alien races or humanoid races, and creating a collective which makes the whole which spreads consciousness to the entire solar system and makes the solar system become conscious of itself. And the same going to the galaxy and to the universe and to the multiverse, until consciousness goes back to all the way back to source and embraces source. So it's almost like unconditional love becoming conscious of being unconditional love. So yeah, I hope you found this video interesting, and talk to you in the next video.